An integral part of the leadership program that we've been talking about here on this Reimagining Leadership series was the Tilt 365 assessment. This assessment proved to be incredibly helpful for the participants in the program in terms of learning about themselves and learning about their colleagues. And remember, this was a program that it wasn't in-house, but everyone in the program worked for the same organization. So this learning about each other was really important. We'll be covering a lot here in this episode, but what we appreciated was the orientation of this model towards strengths and the developmental nature of the entire tilt system. The model helped us all understand why some things and some people are easy and some are more challenging. Pam Boney is the creator of the Tilt 365 system, and she's joining me today here to share the model with us. What I have learned as a practitioner is that there is so much depth to this model. It just keeps going. Pam's done an incredible amount of research and even continues to evolve how she uses it, and she shares it with us practitioners. And by the way, if you are a coach or leadership development practitioner, this is perhaps the best ongoing learning community that I have ever been a part of. And I arrange my calendar so that I can attend your sessions, Pam.
Oh,
I
Leanne,
have,
thank you.
you're so
I'm so
welcome.
happy to hear that because I
Yeah,
really enjoy it.
it's been great. So I will include links in the show notes for how to get in touch with Pam and the system and the model and all of that. So look in the show notes if you're interested. But Pam, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to join me today. And I would like to start with your focus on agility, because one of the things that I really like about working with this tool and this model is that your focus isn't just on the model and the tool, it's about what it makes possible for the people who engage with the assessment. So, can we start there with agility and why agility? Why is that important to you?
Yes, I'm delighted to hear how you're using it, for sure, because I intend for it to be very actionable, something that we can actually do something with. But agility, back to your question, agility, became something of interest many years ago because I used another personality assessment in my early career and felt like it was boxing me in a little bit too much, and that I thought, no, I'm a lot more than that. I'm more agile, more able to be different patterns in different contexts and different situations. And so that was sort of the genesis of why I started researching, like, is that really, are we fixed,
Mm,
personality types? I don't think so. Um, and today, even more so, like agility is a necessity today, because we don't get to live in the same community all of our lives and work in the same company for 2 decades and never travel the world or never encounter people that are so very different because they grew up in different areas from us, different sets of patterns appreciated, and so forth. So agility, if anything, has become more important
mhm.
today. And it's definitely a buzzword. A lot of people are using the word agility, but there are very specific reasons that we might not be agile, that are related to personality and related to a fixed identity of how we think about ourselves.
Mhm.
So that's, we try to make it really practical that you can choose to be agile.
Yeah, one of my, as I think about my work, doing work with leaders and with organizations is, and there's another term you talk about, agile is, a term that's in the zeitgeist right now.
Yeah.
And another one is, VUCA, the
Yes.
VUCA, which is
Yes.
volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Yeah.
And and I don't think we're going backwards. I think
No.
it's only going to get more VUCA if that's possible.
Yeah.
And it's all parts of life. It's not just the business world, or it's all of life seems really complex. And we can see what I think is, all of the polarization that we're
Hmm.
seeing in politics and in other, social issues, I think are rooted or at least related to our fixed mindsets,
Hmm.
our unwillingness to be agile, and that leaves us stuck and actually in a downward spiral and focusing on the wrong things. And so that's that's how I tie perspective, being able to take broad perspectives and many perspectives to agility and to the model.
Yeah, what you're making me think right now is that, why has this happened and why is divisiveness and, fixed mindsets become even more problematic? I've been thinking about that a lot. Are you interested in talking about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, let's go. If it's interesting to you, it's probably interesting to other people that are listening. So yeah.
Yeah. People ask me all the time, like, well, why is divisiveness worse now than it used to be? Well, I think it's because, technology, every wonderful thing has a double-edged sword sometimes, like has the other side of the coin. And technology, although we love it and, we're all utilizing it, it's made everything faster. And especially AI and, pointing things to us and social media and us hanging out and living our lives on the internet has caused the people that, we're consumers. So it's caused all the companies that promote to us to promote things that we're already interested in. So if we show an interest in something, we get more of that. So I think what's happening is that we've gotten so smart with technology, and AI is pointing only the things to us that we've already said we're interested in. So it's just taking us deeper and deeper and
Mhm.
deeper
Mhm.
into the
Mhm.
groove of what we already said we were interested in. And unfortunately, what that does is it kind of eventually narrows what we're seeing on our in our inbox in our in communications on social media, and eventually eliminating the ones that we're not interested in,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that we need to be watching. Same with the news media. Like I think it's important for us today to not just look at one biased, news reporting. We need to be looking at both and then trying to find objective sources.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because the more we dig into only what we're interested in, the more divided we become. And the reason we like this is our personality kind of is attracted to a certain way of thinking and a certain set of patterns. So it's kind of like a temptation that the internet is feeding us.
Yeah.
Uh, and so therefore, we're less aware of multiple perspectives that you were talking about.
Yeah, and because we're one person, we're not the person that consumes the media at home and on our free time. And then we come to work and we're a more holistic person and able to see complexities. That same person comes
Mhm.
into the office and interacts with people that now we're forced to interact with people that are different than we are.
Mhm.
And so that's also how I see, doing something like this, learning about ourselves in the work setting. It like inserts a pause into our life and time for us to stand back and reflect. And while in I would say most any leadership program, kind of the hot topics of religion and politics and things like that are usually kept out of the conversation. We're still showing up with all of those beliefs and everything. And so if we can, in a safe space, learn about ourselves and our tendencies and other people and their tendencies and start working around, how we can get along better at work, I just have to believe, I want to believe that that will transfer into our home lives. And in fact, I know
Mhm.
that much of the leadership development that we do has almost as much impact or maybe more impact on people's personal lives than it does on the business. So
Yeah.
there's a great, there's a great overlap and integration there.
Mhm. I so agree. I like to think that we become. Davis Amanda or Amanda. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Hope you cut that part out. I like to say that when we're in a group, especially at work, we get more interested in what's going on for my personality. Like we're not sitting around by ourselves thinking about our personality. It's when we interact in a
Mm,
relationship or in a group setting that we kind of go, oh, I see myself here, I see them here. Like all of a sudden, the dynamic becomes interesting to us in the work setting, I think, or in relationships, at least
mm-hmm.
in groups, sometimes in families. And yeah, if we can learn it at work, then we can certainly bring it home and vice versa.
Yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
matter where it is that we get that awareness of, oh, yeah, when I was that way,
There I
I didn't
am.
like that.
Yeah,
Right.
and so maybe this is a good lead into for you to talk about how the model is constructed. There's quadrants, there are styles, but one of the things that I want to say about what that ties to what you just said is that when we see ourselves showing up, and there are elements of this model where I feel like I can go in and see, like, where did I get stuck or where did I get triggered today, and I can kind of find why my personality likes to respond that way. And then I can look at the model either on the opposite side, like a personality style that's opposite of mine, or even some competencies that are adjacent to what I'm really good at. But so I have areas that I'm really good, but then there's other places, like for me, resilience or spirit is one that I really need to work on. And so when I find myself stuck and thinking of all the reasons why it can't work, if I move to those questions, it really is helpful. And I'm using this a lot with my clients too. So now I've probably lost everybody because they're saying, "What are you talking about? You're blah, blah." So maybe now's a good time for you to talk about the model. And again, the show notes are going to help once you've laid this out. People can go back and look at the model again, because I think as you're walking through, I know I'm visual and I'll be saying, okay, that's the top, the bottom, the right side, the left side,
Mhm.
etc. So just everyone who's listening, pique your curiosity for what Pam is about to describe here.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a great question. I think what I've spent my life doing is trying to visualize an architecture of what our inner identity looks like. And then to a very granular degree, it help us understand ourselves, and all of the traits that are either innate or developed traits, and why those traits are what they are, and also what happens when a trait gets triggered, and we move into fear. Because when all good traits are wonderful. Like we don't notice them when we're genuinely just
Hmm.
being compassionate or disciplined or organized or any of the good traits it is to be a human. But when we all of a sudden it becomes extreme, usually what's underpinning it is some sort of fear. And now we become much more pronounced and emotionally charged underneath that trait. And now other people are noticing it. They're like, well, wait a minute. Like I didn't like that. So, I spent many, many years making observations and taking notes on every pattern that I saw in others. And then how did I feel about it? And then what happened in me, like when he's too blunt, what happens and how do I feel, with that, and do I become defensive,
Hmm.
so all the patterns I categorized into, back in the day it was called the virtues project, but I categorized all these traits into virtues and vices of leadership. And
Okay.
those words are very archaic today, but So we've changed them long ago, but they're character traits that are timelessly positive, and then there are overused traits that are underpinned with fear, and they're not positive usually.
Mm-hmm.
They may serve you in the moment. They may serve you occasionally, but if you do them a lot, they're going to actually push people away from you. So I organized this taxonomy of all of these traits that I collected over time into a table, a taxonomy that you can actually print out and look at so that you can examine your behavior and
Mm-hmm.
look at a specific behavior that you notice in yourself, and then go back to the library, the taxonomy, look at it and go, oh, is that overused or underused, or is it right on? So it's actually based on Aristotle's golden mean.
Oh,
It's
okay.
how I organized them to begin with. But I thought that was a fascinating theory from Aristotle back in the old philosophy, ancient wisdom, that positive traits are good in moderation, but when they become kind of what he used to call perverted or put into an extreme, actually something else is going on.
I didn't
And
know that
that's
Aristotle was the originator of,
you did it.
basically, no, any strength that's overused become a weakness. That's
Mhm.
basically, I didn't know that that was from him.
It is, yeah. That's
Great.
what I based it on. Well, that was my
Yeah.
first, the first theory was, I thought that was such a good idea, like, yes, that's so wise. Discipline is great, but rigidity is not. Honesty is great, but blunt isn't as much. And these extremes can be used occasionally to get each other's attention, which is fine. We're kind of forgiving if we do it every now and then. But when somebody is repeatedly using a trait that's extreme over and over and over, we kind of start going, I don't think I want to hang around this person.
Right. And
And
and it's
they're
off-putting
not
at work
all.
too, for in teams. It
Mhm,
creates that resistance and, yeah, a lot of drag in
mhm.
teams.
When somebody else gets in fear, it's contagious,
Uh-huh.
like it spreads. So I think, like let's say you're interacting with somebody and they start worrying about and having doubt and, will help me figure this out. Well, you start feeling like, oh, I have to take care of this person, like, oh, they need me to be strong. So there's all these subtle things that happen that are about energy.
Mhm.
And, we might go, okay, well, I'll help now, like you need me right now, I'll help now. But if that person keeps doing that and the frequency is over and over and over, eventually you're like, yeah, I don't have enough energy to take care of you.
Mhm.
So um, it's how we exchange energy is through personality. Personality is actually a strategy for how we interact socially.
Oh, that's so interesting. Personality
Mhm,
is a strategy for how we
mhm,
interact socially.
mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
And we learned it in our first human system, our family.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And so you organized all of this and you said the taxonomy or in the library. Was it, I would call it like a circumgraph right now because it is organized. It's organized in a circle, but really there are the quadrants, the top and the bottom, the
Mhm,
right, the left, and then those combine to make the personality style or the
mhm,
tilt style.
mhm.
And before I ask you to go further, why do you call it tilt?
Yeah. Yeah, tilt is kind of a play on a couple of things. I don't like typing, so I wanted something that had more fluidity, like something that you might do instead of be.
Mm-hmm.
So tilting is something you might do to tilt into a set of patterns in order to get a certain outcome, whereas type is more deterministic and fixed. So I like to kind of, it's a different T word
Uh-huh.
that helps you get into action versus just being something. So that's one. But the other is it's sort of they use the word tilt in poker. And the way it's used in poker, when you're full tilt, it means that you're showing your emotion and people can read your cards.
Aha. So it's
Like
the
they can
opposite
read
of
the
poker
hand that you
face.
have.
It's opposite of poker face.
Mhm,
Okay.
it is.
Huh.
And so when you have too much tilting going on and you're over tilting full tilt, then actually you're playing your cards with other people and they can read your emotions and now they start feeling responsible for your emotions too,
Mm.
cases, or they start moving away from your emotions.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's basically, you know, you want to tilt to a certain degree, but not go too far and go full tilt.
Yeah, I work with another consulting firm that uses the tilt system, and I was facilitating a group, and on a break, the one of my colleagues suggested that I tilt more impact because I was being my way is to be very thorough and fairly slow, and he was picking up that some people were, like, let's move it along here, and we
Yeah.
have that, and it was really great feedback. I wasn't offended by it at all. I knew exactly what he meant when he said, and so for those of you listening, tilting impact means being faster, being quicker with the decisions and all of that. And so I was being very slow and thorough, and I was losing people. And so basically, he was saying, you know, pick it up, get to the point, be more pointed and more concise in what you're saying. So it becomes a shorthand too, and it's not being weaponized that way. So he was, and I can imagine, like you said, I could imagine myself like a what are those toys that like tilt, and I could just imagine myself like leaning more across the side of the model to what was comfortable for me, and I knew exactly what to do when I got that feedback.
That's awesome. Well, you're using it exactly the way that we intend,
Uh-huh.
which is, you know, when you know the four primary patterns and you're able to be any of the four and on command, you know, like just very quickly shift into a different set of patterns, you know,
Mm-hmm.
traits, then you can produce a different outcome. So he was kind of asking you, okay, what's the gist of it? You know, be a little more risk taking,
Yeah.
you don't need to be so thorough. We're ready to rock and roll, is what he was basically
Yeah.
saying. We're
Yeah.
with you. Let's go. And so that's kind of the gist of the impact tilt. And each one of them has, you know, it might be that I'm impact, and very often my team will say, "Can you please slow down and get in the details a little bit with us and go more structure?" So, you know, each of our patterns are, you know, like helpful at a different time, right? And
Yeah.
other people, if they have the language, the common language, to be able to say, "Hey, can you be this way for us right now?" And you get the concept. It enables you to more quickly be agile and
Mm-hmm.
move into that particular pattern at, at someone's request.
Yeah. So is it as I was thinking about talking about the tilt model today, do you typically start by talking about the patterns like impact, structure, clarity, and connection? Or do you start with, like the quadrants, humanity, courage, wisdom, and resilience? How do you, and I probably just lost some people there, but it's just the model is appropriately complex. It's not, I think if you get too simple, well, then your questions don't get answered when you start digging into it and say, well, why is it this way? But I want people to leave today understanding at least, I think, those patterns, or the profiles, but I
Mhm.
don't
The
know if
big
you
picture.
also, yeah. So walk us through that.
Mhm. Okay. So I like to start with simplicity. Yes.
Okay.
Um, you know, so we usually don't start with the whole taxonomy and the Aristotle's golden mean, but that's how it was built. You know, like that's how I began. It actually wasn't a circumplex for the first 15 years. It just became one in 1998. And when I saw the relationship of the circle that I had created in the linear part of it, But I like to now start with the circle. So
Mm-hmm.
let's start with the circumflex, and you have the top, the bottom, the left, and the right.
Mm-hmm.
The top and the bottom are two thinking preferences and two patterns that people usually prefer one over the other. So your tilt is different from mine. So you,
Mm-hmm.
in the thinking preference, prefer more logic, more thorough detail, more knowledge, information, historical data, empirical evidence, logic, practical information. I see you smiling because you love that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, well, that's just the right way to do it.
Of course it is. And I, on the other hand, prefer the top, which is imagining and what's the future, what's possible, conceptually, like what might be the future. So more conceptual, less tactical actually, and
Mm-hmm.
more strategic, more conceptual, ideas
Uh-huh.
um, that are based on kind of more intuitive ways of thinking. However, one without the other is a problem,
Yeah. So
right?
listening to you, I'm imagining. So I can see the model in my head right now, but I can also see, like in polarity management, that
Mhm.
you're not deciding between something that's good and something that's bad. These are both positive traits to have that we want to be able um, to play in. Like,
Mhm.
I need more practice playing in possibility and risk taking and all of that. And I don't know if you need more,
Oh, of course I
rational
did.
and logic, but I can speak for myself. And I know that when I get stuck, I need to move more into possibility and
Mhm.
vision and risk taking, which is
Mhm.
hard for me. Yeah.
Mhm. But we have both.
Yes.
Just physiologically, we have both. We have, it's not left and right brain exactly, but we like to refer to it that way sometimes. But right brain is that conceptual part. You have that. You have the imagination, you have the creativity, etc. And I have the logic and the practical and the historical, logical
Right.
data. So we both have those parts of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just we prefer one over the other,
Yeah.
so we nurtured it more.
Yeah.
And as you've nurtured it more and it works for you, your brain uses the other one a little less. And so that's why it is harder for us. We have to actually, intentionally go there when we get stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so that's the top and the bottom. So those are
Okay.
the thinking preference. And then the left and the right are our feeling preference. On the left in the model, it's the heart versus the gut or the body. So the heart patterns are about feelings and taking care of people and relationships. So it's about nurturing and empathy and likability and compassion and trust and these sorts of things that
Mm-hmm.
help us build relationship and help us belong and to one another and interact as humans and systems. So that preference is more taking care of others, so more nurturing and compassionate. And the other are also feelings, and those are tenacity and passion for justice and doing the right thing and accountability and integrity to the law. And so it's a different set of feelings, but it's still emotionally based.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about passion versus compassion. um so it's confidence, courage, all of those sorts of things, sort of our hero warrior part. And we have both. We all have a heart. We all have a gut. Our body likes to get in, experience and try things and be courageous and do different things. So we all have both. Well, we prefer one or the other
Mm-hmm.
more than the other. And so we nurture it more. Um, so that's the four, we have to decide, like, what's my preference in the thinking, what's my preference in the feeling,
Uh-huh.
and then those two come together for the tilt pattern. So we have a preferred feeling style and a preferred thinking style. Those two come together in the corner and tell us the way that we most like to interact, and that's our personality strategy.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm hoping that people that are listening are like tracking now. Okay, top, bottom, that the vertical axis is the way we think, the horizontal axis, how we feel. And then when we combine those, and it could be that as you're listening, that you've already found your quadrant,
Mhm.
like, oh, I am definitely, more thinking and more gut. That's primary, but I'm a very close second with the heart too. So I'm, that's where my tilt is.
Mhm.
So why don't you go around the corners now and combine and with when I said impact, when I was given the feedback, I need you
Mhm.
to tilt more impact. What does that mean? Which two
So
were
impact
combined
is
for impact?
so the two adjacent um, quadrants or meta strengths that you're putting together for impact are the possibility thinking, so idea focused, we call it resilience, and courage
Mm-hmm.
is the feeling style. So you put courage and resilience together, and you end up with the impact style. And so, and the impact style is really focused on speed, and that's what your colleague was saying. Okay, we're with you, so you can go faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're with you and we're about to go to sleep. So
Yeah.
move
Well,
faster.
probably not, but
No,
you
no.
know, it could also. Let me just say, it could also have been that he's impact,
And he
and so
is.
okay, well, he just wanted you to go faster.
And
And there could have been other people in a different tilt pattern that,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it did. I will say too that when I sped up, it felt good to me too. It
Oh, that's
felt
good.
more energizing. It felt more lively. And so that was good. That was good counsel.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
comfortable for him, but it was also a little more fun for me when I started like picking it
Good.
up and doing that. So again, to your point that we are really capable of tilting.
Hmm.
We can do that. And when I did it, I felt more energized and I had more fun.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
who I work with CEOs and particularly entrepreneurs, and that group tends to be uh, a high impact group.
Yes.
Is
Hmm.
that your experience and what you find as well?
Yes, because the impact tilt pattern has to have a certain comfort with ambiguity and a tolerance for risk.
Hmm.
So you find entrepreneurs like they're counting on themselves, so they have to be confident enough to be okay with a lot of risk.
Hmm.
And that's not comfortable for everyone. It's not for
Right.
everyone. Um, but yes, the pattern of impact you will see are small team leaders usually, um, and entrepreneurial. Like the reason is because what motivates them is freedom and autonomy.
Hmm.
When you put freedom, creative freedom, and autonomy together, the two underpinning needs of the two quadrants, put those together, that's the entrepreneurial role is perfect for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go down the right side and combine now the courage and the
And
wisdom
wisdom.
quadrant for
Mhm.
structure.
Okay. So wisdom, of course, likes a lot of the data, right? So the data, the knowledge, the scholarly input, the historical, empirical information. So that person is going to combine that with the courageous, results oriented, tenacity and passion. So the structured tilt is, we call it the mastermind, because they're fabulous problem solvers.
Hmm.
They can dig in the details, and they're very courageous about addressing, things accurately, like this is what the right thing to do is, this is what we need, these are the results that have to happen. You put the courageous warrior together with the wise, like knowledgeable scholar, and you have those two things together, and you do have a tremendous problem solver, builder, architect,
Mm.
of systems.
Mm-hmm. And what roles typically do we find in structure?
Yeah, so any role where there's a lot of organization, a lot of details. So for example, accounting,
Mm.
architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, an architect, when they're building a building, they've got a lot of details that have to go together in order to get the foundation, the footings, the infrastructure, like everything has to go together right. So they're very good at very detailed and conscientious planning
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
scalable systems. So, you don't want to go build a skyscraper with an impact tilt. The impact tilt person might have the idea of how it could look,
Mm-hmm.
but really want that thorough thing you were talking about. You don't want to go up in a big structure that wasn't designed by a structure
Yeah,
person.
yeah. So would we find like project planner
Hmm.
types and
Hmm.
maybe I think system engineers, maybe also
Engineering, software engineering.
okay, software engineering, all of that also
Hmm.
in the structure tilt,
Hmm.
and which is also my primary tilt.
Hmm.
And I love curating. Like I
Hmm.
like that's why I like doing these like long leadership programs
Hmm.
because there are a lot of parts that when they fit together, it's and that elegant fitting together, that elegant integration is always what I'm looking for. And are all
Yeah.
the parts being taken care of? Like is the psychological, the physical, all of those needs, and are we tying back to the goals of the organization? And so I love it's very dynamic for me that being like I actually I like this structure tilt. It fits
Yeah,
me
it's
really well.
structure that we find that the consultants that are structure and also trainers that are structure are the best ones
Hmm.
usually. That skill, project management, same thing, because they've got to be patient enough to take it from conception, planning, process, deliver it,
Hmm.
then come back and evaluate it and make it better. And that requires a lot of patience, a lot of conscientiousness, a lot of detail, and a lot of figuring out how can we make it better next time.
Hmm.
Problem solver.
Yeah, and for me, I know partnering with someone who has more of that top quadrant too, the resilience, the visionary, and all that. When I can partner with someone like that, then the fun comes in, the
Mhm.
visionary, the innovation comes in when I'm with someone else, or at least thought partner with someone who has that tilt or more competency there. All right,
Well,
so
let's go
let's
to the
go.
connection tilt. Is
Yeah.
that where
Do you
you
want
were
to just
headed?
go? Yeah, let's just since we're there, let's just go to the connection tilt. So where
Yeah.
on the model is that?
So the connection tilt is opposite of structure. So it's on the other side. So, and that's the most playful, fun set of patterns. So you went there. So I'm going to take you up there. Um, so it's the combination of ideas and the resilience, the future, the creative ideator, and the combination of humanity. So taking care of people. So the
Mhm.
human part. So when you put the heart and the people, and this is how we're going to connect and engage with one another with the ideas, you put those two together and you've got the cross pollinator, the
Wow.
connection cross pollinator. My favorite example is Oprah Winfrey, the great curator of like people and ideas and pull people together
Uh-huh.
that have different ideas and share them with the world. So that particular quadrant, very entertaining, playful. They're thinking about like, is this going to be enjoyable? They're very likable, great with hospitality, tuning into trends, aesthetic beauty. Like, does it look pretty? Does it look like a good venue? Are we going to enjoy this? Will people be engaged,
Uh-huh.
etc.? So that would make a great partner in a program like what you're delivering, to have somebody caring about the hospitality aspects of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as you're speaking, even there are parts of what you were saying that I jibe with, that, oh, the physical space and all of that is really important for me as well. The, the fun and the connection and all of that doesn't come as natural, but I know it is vital when you bring a group of people together. So even some of that, I naturally go towards some of that, and some of that is can actually be a blind spot for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think this is how nature, helps us to become whole throughout our development, is that we're attracted to partners or, people that we work with, or people in our friends or,
Mm-hmm.
spouses, partners, anybody that we're attracted to that's the opposite pattern
Yep.
of ours, helps us see parts of ourselves that we didn't see before and that we kind of like it. And when we hang around people that are different from us, we become a little bit more like them. They become a little bit more like us. If it's a good relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if it's not, and everybody's in fear, then it's going to create polarization and
Mm-hmm.
divisiveness and problems.
Interesting. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if it's a healthy relationship and healthy respect for one another, then we become more like each other.
Yeah, and I also love the Enneagram, and my opposite on the Enneagram is also the adventurer or the epicure. And after I learned about that system, I realized that most of my good friends are my opposite, because
Mhm.
they are the people that will, plan the fun, plan the fun and make me laugh and all of that, things that I don't naturally do, but I naturally gravitate. And I, of course, really enjoy people just like me. And we get into these really serious, deep conversations. And the people that I really enjoy being around are tend to be my opposite, or many of them are, and they really pull me forward in that way.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that so often. And even we are different. If we're doing one tilt pattern at work all day, sometimes when we go home, we might pull in those opposite traits and
Hmm.
be completely the opposite at home,
Yeah.
in our social life with our friends and so on. So we're
Yeah.
multidimensional
Yeah.
and very contextual. And that's why I like the idea of tilting. Like you might tilt different when you go home. You might tilt different when you're out with your friends,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
So we have one more profile.
Mhm.
So let's cover that one.
All right, this is the one that's called Clarity, the Quiet Genius. And this is the combination of the humanity traits or the heart traits of relationship plus the historical, logical wisdom part. So think of this together, somebody that's very humane and kind and nurturing, and add that to someone who's thoughtful and mindful and logical, makes the great advisor, right?
Hmm.
The quiet genius, it collects information, incredibly knowledgeable, and they think all the time about how information impacts people. So they're always thinking about those two aspects. And so when you interact with a clarity person, they're usually going to be quiet. They're never self-promoting.
Hmm.
Um, and they're always caring. They're always taking care of others. But they're also full of information. I mean, they just love gleaning information and investigating. So they make great troubleshooters,
Hmm.
like, they'll tell you, well, that's a good idea, but here are the 18 ways that I could see that going wrong. And it's because they really study a lot.
Uh-huh.
They really do investigate the details. And they do, they're, if anything, they can tend to worry or get,
Hmm.
analyzed a little too much and get too much in that, just like the other three can get too much in their full tilt, right? Um, so clarity, we always think of them as kind of the nicest of all four,
Hmm.
right? Because they're just so nice to be around and you can trust them implicitly. They're gonna die with your secret. Um, like they're just really wonderful to be around and highly reliable, and you can always count on them. Like they're always going to be there for you. So they really care about relationships, and um, they're able to care in such a thoughtful,
Mhm.
mindful way,
Mhm.
that we really, feel like this big, huge hug happened.
Yeah, and I coach a lot of clarity people, particularly like in the IT industry or whatever. There will be, there will be a combination of structure or clarity. And one of the hardest things I find for a clarity tilt is self promotion. Being in a meeting and speaking up about their ideas or what might go wrong, and that's often the path of development for them. And so what I want to do, because we're running short on time here, and I want to get into like the developmental aspect of this. So we've gone through the thinking, the feeling styles, and then the four tilt patterns. And like I said, I used this model, this assessment in this long leadership program, this multi-month leadership program, for all the obvious reasons that we've been talking about, but also because it was easy to find a developmental path. And also in the report that someone gets on the final pages, it makes recommendations for you to try this. And so now that if people have an idea in their head, one thing that people could do is go to the opposite. So in my group, there were a lot of clarity tilts. And the opposite of the clarity is that impact, being quicker decision, risk taking, all of that. And, but for some people, that was some of those actions felt too far reaching for them. They weren't quite ready for that. So they could also go to the adjacencies. They could go to a something that's next to their pattern and see, okay, I'll try this. And I want to give an example of, so I was talking with the client yesterday, clarity tilt, and this person is stuck. They want something to happen, and as we were talking about actions that they could take, they started throwing up all these reasons why it wouldn't work. And so what we did is focus them on the resilient, the idea, the possibility, which is more of an adjacent instead of opposite for this person. It was adjacent. So we could go through and think, how might this work? Or how could you make that work? And so in this program, everybody got their tilt profile, and then they took on a practice that they would commit to for the remainder of the program. So they had about 6 months left in the program, and we have a practice tracker. And so, in addition to choosing their behavior, many of them then either asked their cohort, so they were in smaller groups, and or other colleagues that they worked with, and said, here's what I think I need to work on. Is this your experience of me? And what actions could you recommend? Or here's what I'm thinking about. Does this sound right to you? And then they've been tracking that throughout the whole program. And then as they made it known that that's what they were working on, their colleagues would support them. So for one woman, she was clarity and she really wanted to be more bold. And so someone in her cohort was tasked with making a presentation in front of a group, and she handed it over to her colleague and said, I'll support you, but I want you to do it, and this is a safe place. And so there was all of this support, and it just kept building on each other. And so I haven't talked to you about how we used the tilt in this program. It's awesome. It really worked well, and I'm wondering
Yeah.
how else you, is this in alignment with how you've seen other people use the profile in a long leadership program, or what
Yeah.
else, as people are listening, what other ideas would you have?
I love what you're doing, Leanne, because I think that's brilliant. You're kind of helping them into it with something that is a little more comfortable because it's an adjacent trait,
Mm-hmm.
not an opposite trait, the opposite side. Um, and it's what it's doing is everyone is sharing, and here's what I want to be working on. So they're being public about it with each other in a safe space. And that's the key, because we're all human. And when it's nice to be able to say, okay, well, that impact person needs to work on such and such, and I need to work on this, and we can help each other, as
Uh-huh.
opposed to mine is better, that one's not. Like that's what can happen if you just go in and talk about your different styles.
Yeah.
You can weaponize it, as you
Right. I
said.
was gonna say it gets weaponized. Right. Right.
And you
Uh,
can weaponize tilt too. Like we don't want people to do that, but I've seen
absolutely.
it. So you do have to be careful with that. But I love your tracker. I love that you've got them choosing something that they can agree to, that they feels like true for them. I could do this more, and that you've got others helping them
Mm-hmm.
do that. One thing that comes to mind is the sentence starters. I don't know if you're using that.
Yes, I did. In fact, I used that with my client yesterday. I pulled it up because I had already shared it with him, and I pulled it up, and we just kind of went through, and instead of like how could we changed it how could I, and so we made those. We used the sentence starters with the with the blocks and the barriers that he was throwing up for all the reasons why uh,
Yeah.
it couldn't work.
Yeah, the patterns that the person that's opposite of us use feel awkward because we haven't practiced them.
Hmm.
So it's like putting on a new pair of shoes, like they're not going to feel good for a while.
Yeah.
Um, we have to keep doing them for a while, and then they get comfortable. So that's it. That's we gotta let ourselves out of that comfort zone, and get that external
Hmm.
validation and support, that, okay, yeah, that was good,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I could like just speaking with you here, I feel like I've got another hour or two or three worth of questions here. What I want to do though is direct people to your website. I also want to say, if after listening to this, anyone is interested in taking the tilt, just reach out to me. I'm obviously qualified, and I can help anyone with the tilt. Understanding your tilt profile, and I really would love people to go to your website or anything else that you've got going on. So why don't in these last few minutes you tell us about what you've got going on, how people can reach you, what's the best way to learn more about tilt, and even how to get certified in it if someone's listening and they want to really dig in deeper and be able to use this.
Yeah, so the way to find us is tilt365.com. And we actually have a new website coming out in June. So it's exciting. We're pushing that out right now, doing some QA on it. So the Tilt 365 will be refreshed with a whole new brand coming out, but you can certainly go there now. You can get certified, of course, like Leanne is, and become a learner of Tilt in our affiliate program community, where we meet all the time and keep talking about it and keep
I
learning
know,
about
it's
it.
awesome.
And that's really fun. I hang out with the whole community twice a month. One in an education, kind of continuing education on the content of Tilt, and the other is like, how to build it into your systems and use it
Mhm.
application wise.
Mhm.
But yeah, and you can also write to me, Pam at tilt365.com. And we do work through our partners though. So we absolutely encourage you to reach out to Leanne. So I hope they're going to see your email. If they come through you, we're going to love that, because then they're going to feel supported and so forth. But anyway, we love working through people on the ground, working,
Mhm.
with these programs, especially the longer programs like you're talking about. That's
Mhm.
exactly what we want, because it does take a little while.
Mhm. One of the things that we didn't talk about, because that wasn't the focus of the program that I'm doing right now, but there's a whole body of work around how to use this with teams, with
Hmm.
intact teams that are actually working together. And so you can get a team agility report. So right now with this group that I'm working with, what we were able to get, everybody got their individual profile. And then we were able to see what the whole group, how the whole group mapped, how many were all the different profiles. I suspect that I'll be doing more work inside the organization with team agility. So, using the tools for intact teams and how to increase agility as a team. So, we didn't talk about that today, but that's a whole other body
Yeah.
of work that you all have.
That's a big focus for us because we get really interested in our personality in a team, as
Mhm.
earlier, and we're starting to experiment with labs, which is basically
Yes.
using, really going into a true problem that the team wants to work on. And then we just use tilt as the scaffolding, the architecture underneath the surface so that we can have a common language for how we
Mhm.
observe what that team is doing as they're solving their own problem or as they're, creating some new solution. So we have them actually working, focused, and then you as the consultant are able to observe what's going on and point out the different tilt patterns that are unfolding and how all four of them are necessary to innovate.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that call that you did in the affiliate program where you talked about how you had used it. And again, this is where your impact tilt, your ability to envision and take action and take risk is so good for someone like me. It made so much sense, and it's not an approach that I would have thought about, but I actually feel comfortable doing it. I just wouldn't have
I
thought
bet.
about it. Yeah. Yeah.
And we
Pam,
say that, oh, I was gonna add
go
one more
ahead.
thing that I think is important, and that is that most personality assessments are kind of once and done, and
Mhm.
which is good. We love all assessments, and we think they all have value. But what we've done is built a system that you can kind of take over and over, so that you can use it in different ways and see yourself in different contexts,
Mhm.
and how you shift and change. So
Yeah.
that's important to note, that it's something that we want people to realize, like, oh, right now I'm tilting different than I often do or prefer to do, because the context is calling for it.
Yeah. And I will add one other thing here because you have the positive influence predictor as well, which is like a 360. So you can actually get feedback from other people because we're taking a self-assessment and it's fairly accurate, but it's also based on the way that we see ourselves. But it's interesting too to have other people give their opinion, like how
Mhm.
do I see you? So you have, like you said, different iterations, and the content, I just think you keep learning and you keep going deeper even though you've been doing this for a few decades now.
Mhm.
It just keeps growing, and that's one of the things that I love about it too, is that I feel like it's a system that's always learning and changing, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for what you're doing with this system, and certainly for spending time with us all today on Zoom on this call.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, Leanne. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.